What's up guys, today I'm reviewing Spider-Man Far From Home. This is the sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming and Avengers Endgame. If you haven't seen either of those films, I don't recommend you see this because a lot of it won't make sense and there will be spoilers for particularly Avengers Endgame. So in a nutshell, what's this film about? Well, Peter Parker back in high school with all of his mates who coincidentally are all back at the same time. They were all affected by the blip as it's called in this film. They go on a school trip across Europe. Meanwhile, Mysterio, a new superhero, shows up with a new villain in tow as well. So, what did I think of this film in a nutshell? I loved it. I thought this was a really, really good film. Really fun, really entertaining, action packed, funny Spider Man movie. One of the best Spider Man movies, I would say. I would certainly put in the top three. And if you've watched my Spider Man ranked from a couple of weeks back, you'll probably work out where I would put this. But to talk a bit about the story, there's a lot of twists and turns, there's great balance between action, comedy, and emotional elements. It really does dive into Peter Parker as a person. Notice I said Peter Parker. This is very much a Peter Parker film more than it is a Spider-Man film, because one of the things I like about Spider-Man is balancing out his personal life without the costume, without the mask, him being a person, while also trying to mix in being a superhero. And this film really dives into that, about his identity, what it means to be him, and it does a good job of exploring that and all the challenges that come with that. And of course, there are some twists and turns in there are surprises in there. Sadly, what I think the film wants to be its biggest surprise, its biggest twist and turn, is the most predictable element of it. So I'm not going to say what it is, I'll go into spoilers later on explaining that. But in short, there's a big twist about halfway through the film. Maybe it takes a little while to get there, but about halfway through the film, there's a big twist that turns everything on its head. But if you're a fan of the comic books, or if you just know your Spider-Man lore and history very well, you can see this coming a mile off. It's like the worst kept secret about this movie. So, yeah, that might give away what it is, might not. I'll get into spoilers later on. But the film's well paced, it's constantly building up. The first hour is very much a road trip comedy movie for the most part, about him going to Europe, about him trying to challenge between being a student while also popping out here and there to be Spider-Man. And then the second half of the film is where it becomes like a true superhero movie, and where the action amps up, the stakes amp up. And I think the pacing's actually pretty good. It starts off a little sluggish at the beginning, it constantly just gets faster and faster, more action-packed, more upbeat as it goes along. But it does mean that the first hour can be a little iffy in places. And speaking of how the film progresses, to talk a little bit about the ending without spoiling it, the ending's brilliant. It really brings everything together quite well. There's a running theme throughout this film, well, not so much a theme, but an element about Spider-Man and his character and the way things are going for him that really culminates pretty well towards the end. And to go into with the end credit sequences, because every Marvel has these, there's a mid-credits sequence, there's an end credits one. The mid-credits one is one of the best that Marvel has ever done. I'm going into spoilers later on about that, but I loved that mid-credits sequence. It sets things up for the future, while also being like a good, just brilliant, cheerful, happy moment as it is. So to talk about the characters, starting with Peter Parker. Tom Holland is perfect as Peter Parker. There's been loads of depictions of Peter Parker over the years, but the one that I like is where he's nerdy, he's awkward, and he's got an air of innocence about him. Tom Holland just sums that up perfectly. He is my Peter Parker, and if you've liked him in Homecoming, Civil War, and the two Avengers movies he's in, you're gonna love him. Yeah, this is probably his best performance, maybe? Maybe. So, more Tom Holland, great, brilliant, the perfect Spider-Man in my eyes. And then you got Zendaya playing MJ, who still not confirmed if it's Mary Jane, but I think at this point it is Mary Jane. She we delve into her character a lot more this time around than what we did in Homecoming. In Homecoming, she was kind of there just on the outside, poking in every now and then with like a one-liner or like an awkward, weird look every now and then. But here we actually get into her character a bit more. There's still a lot to learn about her, but we find out in this film, not going into spoilers, that she's just as awkward and just as weird as Peter Parker is. And there's hints throughout the film that maybe she's actually a little autistic. I don't know, maybe I've picked up on something that isn't there at all, I don't know. but I got a sense that maybe there's something a bit more about her character there, and I think that makes her much more relatable, much more grounded and realistic. And that goes for a lot of the characters in this film, that they're just really incredibly well likable. Like even like Flash, who is essentially the school bully, he's a bit of a douche, but he's still got like this lovable, likable quality about him. So one of the big selling points of this film is that it would be Spider-Man with Nick Fury. So Samuel L. Jackson returns as Nick Fury, and that dynamic is interesting. I don't think it's paid off quite as well as we'd have liked, because it's not so much like a buddy cop situation at all. It's much more like Nick Fury, like almost being an aggressive, forceful mentor, like saying you need to do this, and yeah, so that comes off as a little bit of a rougher dynamic than what like Tony Stark and Spider-Man was. It's very clear in this film that Nick Fury is not friends with Peter Parker's Spider-Man, so that makes for an interesting thing, but also some odd moments in the film, and some of the comedic elements and the chemistry between them doesn't always work or gel because of that, because they are so often kind of at odds with one another. Then you've got to talk about Mysterio. So Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, what I like about this character is that he's just kind of a good guy. He's a really likable, good, relatable guy who comes in, he's a superhero, perhaps too likable, maybe, but he establishes himself as the sort of guy you just want to hang out with and have a drink with, and that's great. Of course, this is a different version of Mysterio from the comic books, and Jake Gyllenhaal does a good job of making it his own. Then the last person I want to talk about is Happy Hogan, played by Jon Favreau. Brilliant. Bring him back. He's very much used as comedic relief here in this film, and it works every time he's on screen. This film just, he adds a certain pizzazz to this film, a certain light-hearted charm to it, and I like it whenever he's here, so hopefully we'll see more of him as the franchise continues. And I'll delve into a bit more into the spoilers about characters later on. But to talk a little bit about production, it's well directed, well paced, like I said, great balance between action, comedy and emotion. It's got a bit of everything in there for everyone. And speaking of the action, there's an action scene about 2/3 of the way through the film, which is one of the best, coolest, most visually stunning action scenes the MCU has ever done. And I'll go into that into spoilers a little later on. But to talk about the action just a little bit more, is that one of the things I like about this is it really shows off the athleticism of Spider-Man. Because so often you think Spider-Man, oh, he's got webs, he's swinging around the city, he's just basically doing like a Jungle Book kind of thing, where, well, not a Jungle Book, but it's like George in the Jungle, Tarzan stuff, where he's just swinging around, jumping from one vine to the next kind of thing. What I like about this film is that it really shows that he can do amazing things, no pun intended. He can do flips and spins and so on, and he's just got really good timing and, what's the word I'm looking for? Spatial awareness, I think is the word I'm looking for. And that's one of his powers, one of Spider-Man's powers that we so often don't get to see so much, is that he can react to things quicker than most people, and that results in some cool, stylish sequences, and this film really delves into that. There's also a good upbeat score and soundtrack in there. There are some good songs there too. It really gives the film a certain tone and mood that's consistent throughout, so that's well done. And the CGI and special effects are brilliant. I think the elementals in this film who we've seen in the trailers look pretty good. And yeah, there was no point in this film where I was like taken out for the moment because some of the CGI was a little awkward or anything. It all worked seamlessly, in my opinion. So that's what I think, non-spoilerish, about Spider-Man Far From Home, and I loved it. I thought it was a really damn good film. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought of Spider-Man Far From Home. I do recommend you go and see it. You can also subscribe to my channel, that's the big one. Please subscribe to my channel, it means a lot to me and it'll help me progress my channel further. But you can also go to Twitter and Instagram and follow me at _Grant Burton. And like I said, I'm now going to go into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the film, go see it, come back, watch the rest of this, or if you just don't care, continue watching anyway. So, full spoilers for Spider-Man Far From Home. So the big thing is that Mysterio is the villain. Well, duh. Yeah, we all knew Mysterio was the villain. If anyone knows anything about Spider-Man, his lore, his history, particularly his villains, Mysterio is a Spider-Man villain. So to have him in this film, we knew he was going to be the villain. Now, maybe if you aren't familiar with the character, then yeah, it's a bit of a swerve, it's a bit of a surprise. But I feel like a lot of people do know Mysterio, they do know that he's a classic Spider-Man villain. So the big reveal where it's revealed that he is the villain was a little anticlimactic in my opinion, but they kind of made up for it by linking it into past MCU events. The fact that it does link into Iron Man with one of his henchmen being a scientist who worked in the original Iron Man, and then there's another character. Then he's also linked into, I believe, Captain America Civil War, how he was the one who created the holographic interface that Tony Stark was using. So that does make it for it the fact that it does link into the other MCU pretty well. And to speak about that, I think this is actually a brilliant adaptation of the character, because Mysterio in the comic books is traditionally like a film and theatre special effects guy. He works on the special effects, he works with CGI and props and so on and stunts. So to do a version here where he is essentially a scientist, a theatrical scientist who's using holograms and drones to create illusions, was a brilliant way of introducing him into this universe and make him still science fiction-y but grounded in this fictional world that we've got. I thought that was really well done, a really good adaptation of it. And I mentioned earlier there's a great action scene about 2/3 of the way through. It involves him displaying his powers. I say powers because it's not really power. It's Spider-Man getting sucked into one of his illusions, full of cool visuals and twists and turns. Like he jumps trying to escape and then he ends up hitting the floor because he's not actually in midair or whatever. And there's loads of sequences that ends in with him just walking into like a train line and getting hit by a real train. So really good use of the powers. It reminded me a bit of the Scarecrow powers in the Batman video games. So really well done, just showing you exactly what Mysterio is capable of, bringing in his powers from the comic books into this universe in a way that makes sense. And also a way that makes them cool, because they can be a little cheesy in the comic books. So one of the big things about the ending is, particularly the end of the mid-credits sequence, is that now everyone knows he's Spider-Man. It's revealed that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. It'll be interesting to see how they wrap this up, if they wrap it up at all. Will they simply deny it? Will he come out and say, oh no, I'm not Spider-Man, it's a lie? Will they come out and just embrace it like Iron Man did? I kind of hope they don't do that. I like Spider-Man to have a secret identity. I like it to be like balancing between him being Peter Parker and him being Spider-Man. I don't want them to suddenly merge them into one, although it would make for simpler, easier storytelling, I suppose. But yeah, hopefully they handle that sooner rather than later as well. I imagine we're going to get another Spider-Man movie in like 2 years maybe, so it might not be too long but until we find an answer or a response to this. But at the very least, it's very interesting to see where they're going to go with this. So one of the big surprises of this movie, which was kind of given away by a certain actor showing up at the premiere of the movie, is that J.K. Simmons is back in Spider-Man as J. Jonah Jameson. Brilliant. This is awesome casting, an amazing moment, a huge smile rose on my face when I saw this. One of the best decisions the MCU has ever done in terms of casting. And I've been trying to think about this ever since I watched the film. Has there ever been a franchise where the reboot has used the same character played by the same actor as the original version? I can't think of any off the top of my head. There are some that kind of do it, but not really. The closest I could get was Leonard Nimoy in Star Trek, but then that's not really a reboot because he's still playing the original character, he's just went back in time and now it does not yet. I'm diverging a bit there, but J. Jonah Jameson back, played by J.K. Simmons, absolutely brilliant, great performance, just a small scene as well. Hopefully we'll see more of him in the future. That's just a really good fan service, happy moment, and yeah, I can't believe they've actually done it, and I think it's brilliant. And last thing I want to talk about is the Skrulls. The Skrulls from Captain Marvel are back, played by Ben Mendelsohn, and I forget the actress's name, but it turns out they were Nick Fury and Maria Hill all along. So that kind of explains how Nick Fury wasn't quite right throughout this movie, because it turns out it was actually an alien playing the part of Nick Fury. So that kind of gives that a bit of an excuse. But then we also find out that Nick Fury's in space somewhere working on, I believe it's Sword and Shield or something. It's not part of the comic books I'm not familiar with. But also to bring back the Skrulls, does this mean that we're still getting hints of a secret invasion storyline? I don't know, the Skrulls are usually villains, not good guys. Here they're clearly good guys. But it suggests that they could be gearing up for something in that area. So yeah, It's more just something to think about rather than to actually dive into right now. And that's all I'm going to talk about with Spider-Man Far From Home. Again, I loved it. I recommend it. Go see it. It's one of my favorite Spider-Man movies. If you go back and watch my Spider-Man ranking, this would probably be either number 3 or 2. I haven't quite made my mind up on that. But yeah, top 3 Spider-Man movies in my opinion. And again, subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate that. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @the_Grant Burton. And until next time, thanks for watching.